Welcome to the Market Mystics Podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. What's up, my mystics?
That's funny. I like it.
Taking one out of your book, Josh.
That's true. That's true. Kim, are you a dreamer? Like at night while you sleep? Not like daydream about the future or the past, but like at night while you sleep, do you dream?
Yes, in all the ways you mentioned. Absolutely. I am a dreamer. I always have been.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like how many times would you say that the dream is like, do you remember them, I guess?
Like long-term remember them. So there's like a short-term memory with dreams for me, and there's a long-term memory for dreams with me. Short-term is every day. Long-term is maybe once a week.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like where you remember it when you first wake up, and then an hour later, maybe 3 hours later, you get like some like taste of it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that had something to do with my dream last night.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had somebody once tell me that there is a key word in every dream. And if you can remember the key word, you'll be able to remember the whole dream. And
That's
so
fascinating.
and so they were explaining how sometimes that's why that happens. Like you'll be having a conversation and someone will say something and it unlocks that dream.
Mhm.
And I've totally had that happen. Like I dream every time I sleep, even if I just like doze off doing something for a few minutes. Like I just dream.
Mhm.
And um and so I was like really researching it for a while, and I saw that like keyword, and I tried it for a while. The other thing that they talked about was if you want your brain to think that dreams are more important, as soon as you wake up, write them down, and then your brain will say, oh, this information is something they want, and so it will actively hold on to it longer um, than it than it does currently.
That's interesting. Here's the issue with that for me. I'm a slow to wake up kind of person.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like super grumpy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I need to slowly wake up.
Yeah.
So
I
there's
get
no
it.
like popping out of bed and like, okay, let me write this down.
Yeah, I get it. That's the last thing that I want to do when my alarm goes off is grab a notebook and start writing something down.
I know we could make it exciting. If I could make it exciting, like something I really want to do,
Yeah.
then I'm much more likely to do that.
I have like done it where if I remember the dream like an hour later, I'll like put it in my phone and do it, but I don't do that consistently enough, I think, to really make that change.
Hmm. I bet there's an app for that. I wonder if it
I'm
would.
sure.
I wonder if it would track keywords.
That would be
I
interesting.
also wonder if it would share that information and then really disclose a lot of information about my psyche to whoever it
Somebody.
is that's looking.
Yeah, that's funny. How often do you feel like your dreams have any sort of meaning?
Oh man, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. I think I've always kind of put some stock into my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily in the way that I think every dream is like prophetic or telling me what's
Right.
to come or something like that. But I do think like when I dream of people whom I haven't seen for a long time that I was close to, like it will make me stop and think and remember them and
Mm.
oftentimes be grateful for the relationship we had. Or if it's someone who has passed on or whatever, then I spend some time remembering. I'm somebody who has always, since I was a kid, um, really often flown in my dreams, and I've always really enjoyed that. So I don't know. Like, I guess I put stock in them, but I hold it loosely a bit. Like every now and then you'll have a dream. I don't know if this happens to you. Every now and then you have a dream that it's like, oh my gosh, that just happened. Like a few months later, you're like, I dreamt that already.
Yeah. Yeah.
You ever have that happen?
Yeah. I've definitely had times where it's hard to say that like it's almost like a deja vu feeling, except for it's like I like dreamt that, but it's like I don't know that I could like exactly recall the dream and the situation in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um or at least elements. I feel like there's a lot of times I have dreams where um the like 90% of it will just be this wacky, weird nothingness, and 1% of it will be like really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a lot of times when I have a dream that I'm like, oh, that there was something important there, it's almost as if I have to like weed through the like, oh, my brain was just like closing synapses and like processing the day. Um, and then like, okay, now that's the piece of it that actually had importance.
Sure. Do you ever find yourself having dreams that might be revealing something beyond the veil?
Yeah, I would say I have, but I don't know that I would say it's the most common. Like I would say the
Sure.
majority of the time I dream, it feels very much like just normal life.
What about maybe not necessarily beyond the veil, but just otherworldly?
Mm.
I'm thinking like, I mean, I'm just going to tell you now, everyone's going to know things about my psyche, but I often have dreams where it's just like a normal dream. I don't know, I'm doing this or that or whatever, but I'm in, oh, this specific house. And I know the way around. It is always there. But I have like two or three of these different places. And I've often wondered if it is not so much my brain just making up a house because it's not one that I ever lived in, or like a family member lived in, or I spent a lot of time in, or anything like that. It just is, there's this very real place that I live in some dreams.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
it does make me
no.
wonder, is that something else? Is that maybe not beyond the veil, but more like, is this on a different timeline? Is this something um, that somehow my consciousness or my unconsciousness is connected to because it's real somewhere else?
Yeah. No, I definitely think that that is a real thing. Like I definitely think that that happens.
Hmm.
Um I still wouldn't say that that's the like most common way that I dream, but I've had those dreams. And I do believe that a lot of your dreams are you processing, living, experiencing something else, whether it's like what your spirit is doing while your body is asleep, or whether it's you're tapping into some other timeline or something. I don't know exactly what that would be, but or maybe it's different. Maybe it's all of those things.
Hmm.
um, but I definitely feel like that is something that's real, like something that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes me think
I
of, I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say, it makes me think of that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once,
Yeah.
and all the different timelines. Just, if you haven't seen that, I don't know that I would say I recommend it, but I loved it.
Yeah. It's definitely one that will make you think and process possibilities. But yeah, it's also like it's an odd one for sure.
It is an odd one. It might make you like dog squeak toy laugh.
It might.
Or you
That's
might
true.
find it so ridiculous that there's no way you could laugh at it.
That's also possible.
Right. For
It's one
me,
or the
it was
other.
I laughed a lot.
Yeah.
uh,
Um, have you ever dreamed the same dream as someone else?
I don't know. How do you
Well,
know?
that that like having a discussion about it. So this happened to Bree and I last week or the week before. Um, where she woke up and she was like, "Oh, I was just dreaming that this was happening," and I was like, "I was dreaming that that was happening." Um, and the way like the details of how it was happening was different for both of us, but the theme of the dream was like exactly the same.
Hmm. I wonder what causes that. Is that
I
because
don't
you're
know.
so closely, I mean, related in proximity,
Yeah,
emotionally, probably intellectually, like all the things just aligning?
maybe. I don't know. But that was definitely one I wrote down because I was like, I don't exactly know what it means, but if both of us were dreaming the same thing happening, it probably has importance.
That's interesting. I obviously have not had that happen. Um, and if I did, it wasn't that memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious. Like, it would be a hard thing to know, but like, it would take one person being like, "Oh, I was having a dream about XYZ," and you being like, "Oh, wait, I was too." Like, so I'm sure it's rare that it would happen, but it just was, it like really stood out. Because I was like, man, like, I've never had that happen before. Like, that's not something
Hmm.
I've ever been like, oh yeah, I just regularly dream the same thing other people do. Like, and it was really like that's never happened. But I was like, that's a really cool thing to have happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, have you ever had dreams that you felt like were warnings or like
Um,
inside information?
yeah, yeah. But I've wondered, I guess I've wondered sometimes how much of that dream was something that my psyche or nervous system was worried about happening already, or how much of it was like just totally random new. Um, but no, I definitely have had a dream. I'm thinking of one in particular where it was like it was almost as if I was being walked through um what would happen if I made a decision, and like
Hmm.
getting to experience that decision, and not even as a, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a right or wrong thing, but kind of just here's here's what that might look like. And I woke up and I was like, huh, I don't want to make that decision. I would rather like I would rather find out some, like, if something else would happen. So um
That's
I mean, I
interesting.
guess I took it as a warning because it was like not a future that I wanted.
Yeah. I think that's valid. I was thinking of I had one in particular that it was someone who I knew and had been really close to. But years later, and I had this dream about them just not being okay, like big time, not okay. Like nobody being able to get through to them. It was horribly concerning, even in the dream. And I did not act on it, but I should have because I found out a couple months later that during that time they were having the hardest time they've ever had in their life and were
Mm,
really struggling in a big way, which makes me wonder like there it could be because of connection. Like I knew this person, I was very close with them for a lot of years, but I hadn't been currently. And maybe it was just like a lingering connection and then only my unconsciousness was able to pick up on it and like tell my consciousness about it, I suppose.
Sure.
you know, I don't know. I also really believe that the Lord will speak to us through those things, like, and give us information and insight into things when we need it. When there are no other ways to have that indicated, or no easy ways to have it indicated otherwise.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I do think that God has the ability to speak through any situation, but speak through dreams. Like, I think it's kind of a time where I'm quiet enough that it's just um it's a really available it's an available space for him to step into.
In dreams.
Yeah. And not that he doesn't in other times as well. Um, but it's like forced availability. Like I don't know that I
Sure.
can be overly conscious while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, what do you think then is the difference between dreams and visions?
Um, I think it likely uses the same part of the brain, so there may not be a lot of there may not be a lot of differences between them. Um, but I guess I would just say the main difference to me would be like a dream for me. I've had very few like lucid dreams where I was aware I was dreaming and actively controlling the narrative. So most of the times it feels as if I'm just watching a show, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just watching something. Um, and I think that that's kind of what a vision is like, is you're more like you're alert, you're conscious, um, but you're just watching something play out. Um, I don't know. How would you describe the difference?
I think I would say they're very similar, except one is while you're sleeping and one is while you're awake.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's the revealing of imagery in some way, um, that is not physical and tangible in front of you,
Yeah.
and one while sleeping and one while being awake. Although, I don't know, I've never seen a vision like play out in front of me. It's like a daydream.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a daydream.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's imagery in my imagination. Um, which now that I just said those words together, I wonder if imagination, if the root word is image picture, like
Uh,
probably,
Probably.
right? But I do think it's interesting because in scripture, it talks about in Joel, and then it's quoted in Acts, it talks about um, that God will give old men dreams and young men visions. And I always thought that was interesting that there was like differentiation
Mm-hmm.
happening there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's differentiation in kind, but also in age. And it makes me like wonder if there's a biological mechanism that makes it happen that way.
I don't know. I almost wonder. Okay, so if we're talking about age, we've talked about this before, how also in scripture it talks about how good it is to be like a child, right? Um, I tend to think children will put more stock in what they daydream about, what they
Mm,
would have a vision about. Whereas as you get older, you may have to have something a little more glaring, like a dream that can use whatever imagery it needs without you just discounting it.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like young men probably have more willingness to take heed to a vision that they get. An
that's fair.
old man is probably more likely to be like, no.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I know also that there is something about young kids, and I forget exactly the age where this generally happens. Um, but they really don't know what's real and what's not. And so when they imagine something, it's as if it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Like the concept of imagination is kind of like doesn't exist. So you show them a movie or you show them a video you took on your phone of them, and they both of them are just as real. Whereas when you become an adult, that concept of this is make believe, this is imagination, is comes a little more real.
See, this is interesting to me too. I was just thinking about in the Jewish culture how becoming a man happens at the age of 13.
Mm-hmm.
To me, in Western civilization, current like now times, 13 years old sounds like a child still to
Yeah.
me. That does not sound like a young man, right? That
Yeah.
sounds like an barely teenager.
Right.
And so then if I look at that passage through that lens, yeah, you're still having these young guys who they are young men
Mm.
in every aspect of the word in that culture, but they still have that pliable
Yeah.
imagination. They're still able to like see that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the male brain doesn't fully form until like 25 or something like that. And so that's interesting to think about it from that biblical concept of age, not just our concept of age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think it's we've done a little bit of a disservice sometimes in our lack of language around dreams and visions. And I'll say this: I heard this from Christopher Carter, um, and he was teaching how pre the Industrial Revolution, there what we use the word imagination for had two separate words. And I forget what those were, but one of them meant flights of fancy, which would be like a daydream. You're just wandering off, dreaming about whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one meant divine thought. So they had the understanding that that mechanism could be used by the divine to give you a message, but it could also just be used by you to think about whatever you want. Um, and then sometime during the Industrial Revolution, we switched to where there was a bigger focus on science and less on the divine. And so they I don't know that that's why, but during that time, we just started using one word to describe both things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes away from the the power that that could have.
The relevance of it,
Yeah,
even. Yeah.
yeah,
I tend to agree. And I really like hearing uh that information from you because I think about like this mystic journey, which I really am trying to shift my language. I don't actually mean to say mystic all the time. Like, I really think we're seekers.
mm,
I think we're Christian seekers. I think that's what we're doing.
yeah,
Um, but in this journey, like shifting into the engaging heaven kind of practices and having face to face encounters with the Lord and even the pushback that came from um, church groups, church leadership, um, religious leaders, I would say, and how bad they think it is because it's just all in your imagination. Like,
Yeah.
have you heard this said, Josh? I've
I've
heard
heard
this
that
a
said.
lot of times, except that there is a very real experience that happens with it. And it's not like, oh, I'm just hoping that this will be rainbows and lollipops. That's not what happens when you go and have an encounter with the Lord. Well, it could. I mean, it depends on what he wants to do with you. Sometimes he shows some wacky stuff, like stuff that you go, okay, I don't know about that, Lord. And yet he's still God. And he will either drop it and move on, or he'll make sure that you saw it and you know that it was from him.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you sharing that because I think there's a lot of illegitimizing of face to face experiences with the Lord, because it doesn't happen with God, the creator, stepping into a human form onto this terraform and like
Mm-hmm.
standing before you with a voice like raging waters and a face that you can't look to. Yeah, he
Yeah.
can do that. But that's not always how we have to encounter him. And I don't know. I feel a little vindicated right now.
Yeah. I do think it's important to understand that that is a way he has forever connected with people. Um, it doesn't take away from the possibility that there is also just a flight of fancy and an imagination
Right.
that
And
that
there,
you
it can be both. There can be
yeah,
both.
it can be both, which is yeah. And so it doesn't take away from that, but it also shouldn't take away from the possibility that it was like a message from the divine. Like you were
Right.
connecting with your creator. Like it just the fact that it like could be both, I think shouldn't take away from that.
I completely agree. I think it's like what a disservice to our spiritual walk to try to say that that's not possible. No, you
Mm.
can't use that part that is built in and innate and the most widely accepting thing that you have, uh that you can't use that. Sorry, people just walked in the door. I say people, a dog too. um but that you can't use that thing that's built in.
Yeah.
It's like getting a radar or a radio and being like, well, but you can't use the antenna. It's not a good way to do that. It's
Yeah.
not, that's not legit.
Yeah. 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 It's you can only yeah. That's I think that's a great way. It's reducing the functionality of something that was made to be able to function a bunch of different ways and
Right.
saying you can only use it this one way.
Agreed. Also, if we have a limitless God, why do we try to limit the way that he can speak to us or to others?
I mean, I
Just put
get
that out there.
I get how we I guess limit, but how we want to do that because of how we've experienced it. Um, like
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
hard to imagine that God would choose to connect with someone else in a way that he hasn't chosen to connect with us, or that we have something and no one else gets to do it that way. Like I get how you want there's some safety and probably um legitimacy in having being able to back it up with others' experiences. But also with this particular thing, there's thousands of years of history of other people connecting through dreams and visions.
Right. Right. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true. I think what you were just saying, and like there's kind of some safety in knowing what you can expect. I think this is one of my favorite things that has come out of having or seeking a personal relationship with the Lord and not just relying on, oh, well, I read my Bible twice a day and that is plenty. Obviously, I'm godly. Like not relying on that kind of thing, but actually seeking the relationship is that no longer is it a threat or intimidating or envy inducing when other people have encounters that don't look like mine.
Mm.
And when their relationship results in a relationship that looks different than my relationship looks with my father. Like
Yeah.
it's not intimidating and it doesn't make me doubt it. It makes me go, oh my gosh, you got something new. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you can take that approach anytime you experience something new. Like you can take the approach of, well, how come I don't have that? Or you can take the approach of, whoa, how cool, there's something I didn't know was possible. And I think about how we've talked about over and over how there's like we are all different facets and different expressions and different pieces and
Right.
like how crazy would it be to think that we all were supposed to interact the same way anyways, like and and maybe it is true that there's one person who gets to interact in a way that you don't, but that must mean that you get to interact in a way that they don't.
Right. It isn't a lack thing.
Right.
Like it is an abundance thing. If you can shift
Right.
from thinking that it's lack, that I don't have this, or why didn't I get that, or why wasn't I shown that, instead of that, what if you look at it like, well, there must be something great for me too. I ought to
Mm-hmm.
go seek that out.
Yeah.
But if you just sit in the lack, if you just sit in the, well, I don't have that, then you're never going to advance, man. Like,
Well, you'll never find what you'll never find the gift you were supposed to have.
right. Like, there is something there for you, unique for you. So go find it,
Mm.
go seek it out. Go,
Mm.
yo, God, you got anything for me over here?
I'm sure the answer will be yes.
I know. I know.
Yeah. Huh. Well, okay, listeners, I really want to hear your thoughts on this. And I really want to know if you've ever had the same dream as someone else.
I want to know that too.
And yeah, just because I think there's like, I want to know are our listeners more prone to have dreams or visions? Or do they connect in a totally different way? Like, I'm just really curious because I dream so much that it's just something really fascinating to me.
Yeah. I do love dreaming. I feel like my like spiritual dreaming has toned way down after like seeking the deeper relationship because
Mm,
I now get more visions than I get like prophetic dreams.
yeah,
It's not that I don't get them, and it's not that I get visions all the time, but that's an interesting paradigm shift too.
yeah. Mm, good. Good. This is a very interesting conversation, and I really hope our listeners engage in the comments because it's so fascinating to me. I would love to hear other people's experiences with it.
Same. Okay. Thanks for joining today, guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Thanks for tuning in to the Market Mystics. If you are hungry for more, don't miss out on our exclusive bonus content available only to YouTube members. Demystify the world of cryptocurrency in the cryptosphere and explore everything from outrageous conspiracies to curious current events and out there spiritual musings. Nothing is off limits in Let's Get Weird. Become a channel member on YouTube to unlock these extra episodes. See you in the bonus episodes.